Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy, one of my favorite people. SC Cupp is back in the back room. We'll chat with her in just a second, but first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and/or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, SC Cupp, she's a CNN political commentator and host of the daily TV show Battleground. She was most recently host of CNN's SC Cupp Unfiltered, and before joining CNN, she co-hosted MSNBC's The Cycle. She's a nationally syndicated political columnist, culture critic, author, and consultant who regularly writes for the New York Daily News, Glamour, and CNN.com. She was previously a consultant for Apple TV's The Morning Show, starring Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, and Steve Carell, and HBO's hit series, The Newsroom. S.E., welcome back into the back room.
Thanks for having me.
So, 4 days away.
Here we are.
What are you thinking?
In terms of, like, what's going to happen?
No, just, what are you doing tomorrow?
What am I thinking? I'm exhausted. That's what I'm thinking.
How are you feeling?
Exhausted.
Like, what are the battleground states looking like?
They're all really close, Andy. The polls continue to tighten. And so what I'm thinking right now is it's coming down to her. She's got some ghost voters. These are people that polls can't reach. And those people for her will be young women, college-aged and above, who have never voted before. And so therefore we don't know how they're going to vote. That we think are pretty likely to turn out for her in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan, North Carolina, where there are just a lot of colleges. And so that's an X factor that we can't really wrap our heads around, and a way in which she could be underpolled right now. Over on the right, he is historically underpolled. Almost every election, he's been underpolled just because there are a lot of people who either won't say that they're voting for him, or something else, and then end up turning out. So it's going to come down to who is being underpolled the most, because we have a pretty good sense of who the voters are that are going to come out. We've got early voting. We know how those voters are registered in all 7 swing states. We don't necessarily know who they're voting for. So, for example, in a state like Arizona, that's fiercely independent, registered Republicans are turning out more in early voting. You'd think that means good news for Trump. It might not. These registered Republicans still might be voting for Kamala. We just don't know. Right. So there are all these like micro X factors around. And with the polls essentially 50-50 or like 48-48, those are the X factors. And that's why we can't say today who's got the edge.
She seems to be pulling away a little bit in Wisconsin and Michigan, but how troubling do you think it is for her right now in Pennsylvania?
I actually think she's going to win Pennsylvania, but I think if she doesn't, the tail of this, the question will be, was not picking Josh Shapiro a mistake? There's going to be all of this hand-wringing at the end, but unlike 2016, she won't have to say, well, we didn't really campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin. She did. She was there a lot. No one's really made that mistake of sort of just like overlooking a state or even a part of a state. But I actually think she's going to do well in Pennsylvania, in which case she's likely to win.
And there's been so much stuff happening this week. This is probably the most consequential week in a presidential election that I've ever seen, and I'm old. Okay, like I mean, just it's like you get up in the morning and it's like, holy shit, what did he say last night? So last night it was basically Liz Cheney should face a firing squad and be executed. Like the day before that, it was Mr. Rapist. I'm going to do things to women whether they like it or not. How consequential do you think any of this is, or is it just like it's Trump and he's been doing this shit since the Access Hollywood tape? None of it's ever gonna matter to certain people, but
certain people that's a fact. But because this race is so close, like ordinarily I would have said, none of this stuff is really going to change people's minds. But because this race is so close, it could come down to 40,000 Puerto Rican votes in the 7 swing states, right? And so what he said on Sunday night at Madison Square Garden could absolutely end up being consequential.
Right.
40,000 votes in another election, not consequential when you look at like national numbers. This election, yeah, that could matter. The Liz Cheney stuff, all the stuff that's reminding people of the chaos and what they didn't like about him the first time, he's making sure they remember this week. It's wild. But he's kind of back to running a base election and not trying to turn out those moderates and independents that he would need to get over the hump. So consequential, possibly. It really, just like the Gaza situation, in another year when foreign policy matters not at all, could come down to 60,000 Michigan non-committed voters. Absolutely. That could turn it. 20,000 Hispanic votes in Allentown, Pennsylvania could turn it. So it's not an election where you can say, well, that's not going to matter because the margins are so thin.
Yeah. And it's almost as if like they sat down and made a list a week ago and said, okay, which critical constituency can we piss off? Like yesterday, J.D. Vance is on his Joe Rogan podcast talking about like we're going to get the normal, quote, normal gay vote. So I'm going to ask you, what's a normal gay person? Do you know?
Yeah,
do you know?
That's such a good question. Yeah. Listen.
Can you believe we're actually talking about this stuff?
That's just...
And it's a dead heat. It's a dead heat with all this stuff. That's the crazy part.
It's so out of touch.
But what is a normal gay person,
But that's what I mean. And listen, she's done this a bit too in a very different way. Let me clarify. On Sunday, the same Sunday, Trump was at Madison Square Garden having a base rally. A base not meant to win over new voters. And in fact, that pissed them off. She was in crisscrossing Philadelphia, Democratic stronghold. Where's she going to be this weekend? Atlanta, Democratic stronghold. She's reverting back to the base too, again, in very different ways. That's just by virtue of where she's going and who she's speaking to. She's really trying to turn out those Black men and women voters. So I think the time for reaching new voters, undecided voters, moderates, independents, I think both campaigns have said, we've got everyone that we can get, we've got. Now we've got to turn out the base. Now that looks very different for both campaigns, right? Turning out the base looks very different. And for Trump, it seems like at this late stage, there's no disciplining him. So they've just let him go. And it's like all bets are off. They probably think we've got all the votes that we're going to get. Let's just rally the base. Let's throw everything, but the kitchen sink at it. And she's still trying to run a surgical, tactical campaign where she's speaking to the voters that she'll need.
Well, the interesting thing to me is he lost in 2020. So I'm no Albert Einstein, but I know that if he wants to win this time, he's got to get more voters, not less, right? She very likely has expanded her base. We saw the CNN poll that came out yesterday, I believe, about 20, maybe 25% of non-college white voters have left Trump. So she's expanding and he's shrinking his base. It just seems like that gap is widening. And how much it widens further these last few days, there's still undecideds out there in that CNN poll. There was 6%. Who's undecided at this point?
I know.
What are they waiting for?
I know. Well, she's still underperforming with voters that Biden won handily.
Sure.
She's still underperforming with Hispanics and Black voters. So she might be expanding in some areas, but she has not met his threshold yet. The gap that is widening is the gender gap. She's got more women than Trump has men. And so that could end up being very consequential. And I think when all is said and done, once again, women will have been a very important deciding factor in this election. But he's never been all that interested in growing the tent. And in fact, the efforts over the past 8 years have been to purify and condense it. Kicking out good conservatives, like Adam, like Liz, telling Mitt Romney voters, we don't want you. Telling Nikki Haley voters, we don't want your vote. Like this is shrinking the tent so that it's 100% Trump. And that makes for a very rabid, loyal fan base, but it also makes for a smaller, you have a smaller voting bloc. He's never cared. And in fact, I'm sure you'll remember during one of the midterms, he was saying, well, these elections aren't as important as mine. That is not a great turnout driver.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not wrong. Every base voter he's already got. And I'm not sure he can win over a ton of new voters. Now, he doesn't need a ton. In places like Georgia, if he can turn some of the black vote just a little, that's helpful for him. That could put him over the edge. So again, we're talking about 1,000, thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. We're talking about thousands of votes that this could hinge on.
Yeah. Well, he's betting the store on the crypto Joe Rogan bro dude crowd. And yes. But at the expense of everybody else, but that's not a base that really votes. So not only is he going after these people, it is going to be a wait and see to see if somehow this year they get off their asses.
But there's a lot
vote.
of that. There's that group. That's a big unknown because you're right. Typically that group is less likely to vote. She's got those women that we talked about, those young college-aged women. They're saying they're going to vote. They're registering to vote. We know that. But are they going to turn out on Election Day? That's always an unknown with young voters. The non-committed vote in Michigan. They say they're not going to vote. Some are even saying they're going to vote for Trump. Is that true? We don't know that yet. So there's a couple of pockets of that. People who are saying they're going to vote away, and we just won't know until Election Day.
Yeah. You know, the really interesting thing to me is she's doing everything right to try to expand the base. And he's doing everything. Like if there was a book, like 100 things not to do in the last week of an election. Even yesterday in New Mexico, he's like, why am I in New Mexico? I don't know. It'd be great for my credentials with the Hispanics. And then he proceeds to go, on the West Coast, they like to be called Hispanics. On the East Coast, they like to be called Latinos. Like not only does he fuck up the way he did with Puerto Rico, but he's got the worst damage control skills in the history of any politician. And so when you look at it that way, it's like she's doing everything to just broaden that base. And how could he win with that strategy unless these Rogan dudes get off the couch and vote?
He can. But I think when we look back, if she loses and we look back and she loses, I will have zero criticisms of her campaign. The criticism I will have and have always had is that Joe Biden should not have run for another term and they should have selected someone better than both of them 3 years ago, 2 years ago. We should have known that Joe Biden was not going to run. It shouldn't have been an open question. Then he shouldn't have done it. And they should have picked someone who was in a very good position. She wasn't in a good position to do this because she's still in his administration. So that will be my criticism. I will have no criticisms of how she ran this campaign. It was flawless from a strategy point of view, flawless. And in fact, she beat my expectations of her. If he wins, we'll look back and we'll have to say, well, the things that repulse us do not repulse enough people. And that is a hard reality. I had to swallow that pill in 2016. I swallowed it again in 2020 because it's not like Joe Biden won by a landslide. Enough people still really wanted Trump to win, even after everything we had seen. So that's always going to be a hard pill to swallow. But I think that will be, because as you're saying, it's like he's trying to lose in the final days. If he wins, we will know the economy was bad, and Democrats were wrong to say that it wasn't. People were afraid of crime. They were afraid of a broken immigration system. Those things were real, whether you like them or not. They were real to enough people that he wasn't as bad as he should be, and she wasn't as good as she should be. That's what we'll learn from that.
Yeah, there's going to be no escaping that. Failure is failure, and blame will have to be accepted where due.
But it won't be the fault of her campaign.
It won't be. I mean, and the
No.
fact that it was a truncated campaign, it makes it even
better,
flawless.
even
how
more
she
impressive.
Did it.
No, I totally agree. The problem happened years ago.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with Biden for a second. How consequential do you think his garbage remark will be? Even though Trump is out there literally calling the entire country a garbage can.
Yeah.
But the timing was awful. I mean, she went out and did a great closing argument speech at the Ellipse, and then boom, the next day he's like, folks, they're garbage. And it's like, oh my God, shut up, Joe.
Not smart. Take the mic away from him.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's consequential. I don't think it's consequential because the people he pissed off are already voting for Trump. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it okay.
Mm-hmm.
The people Trump continues to piss off are people he could get. They are persuadable voters. They were not necessarily in her camp to begin with. So there's a difference there. I'm not excusing what he said. I think it was stupid, and politics 101 is don't insult voters and then try to cover it up. But I don't think it's consequential.
And now on the flip side to that, when we look at Trump, there has been so many things that come out of him that it's just hard to keep up with. Like already it's like Hitler. Oh yeah, the Hitler stuff. Forgot about that. Puerto Rico. Forget that.
That was a year ago.
Yeah.
No, like 5 days ago.
Women, whether they like it or not. Because today we have let's shoot Liz Cheney in the face.
New shit.
Like it's like how in a week. I mean, Howard Dean got killed over a scream. Yeah. George Allen said macaca, a word no one knew what it meant. Gone. 20 years of politics. Gone.
Yeah.
This guy is like, I'm Hitler. I'm going to do things to women, whether they like it or not. Puerto Ricans, go fuck yourself. Like, boom. Still
RFK
dead.
is going to ban vaccines.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
RFK, a whole other, like, yesterday he said, I would sign a national ban.
Yes.
Like,
and Trump is saying, I'll let him do anything he wants with vaccines.
Which, of course, you want.
And
you want Bobby Kennedy Jr. to do anything he wants with healthcare.
Oh, my God. Listen,
how is none of this like
disqualifying?
Yeah, but I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, okay, you're not a libtard. I am. But the libtards of the world have to just constantly go, dude, the Access Hollywood, we said that was going to kill him. It didn't. 9 years later and 5 million horrible, offensive things later, we're still thinking, oh, this is it. Stick a fork in him. I say it all the time, stick a fork in him. But like, he does. No. It doesn't matter. How does it not matter? It's to your point. It's like if he wins, it's obviously he is an evil genius and figured out how to do shit that no one else figured out how to do. But what does it say about us as a society that they don't care? We don't care about Hitler. We don't care about raping women. We don't care about normal gays, whatever the fuck that is. Like, how does none of this matter? That's going to be the question. I think
people. I'm going to give a generous answer because I think there will be some people who will blame things like racism and bigotry and homophobia. And that exists undeniably. But my generous answer is what I said earlier. The things that matter most to voters, and we know this, it's the same in all 7 swing states, are the economy, immigration, and crime. Okay, sometimes abortion moves up one and crime falls down or immigration falls down. But these are consistently, for the past 2 years, these have been the top issues. You can find a poll that puts democracy up there, but we've been looking at polls for years now. And in the beginning, Democrats pretended these were Republican inventions, these problems, that people weren't really concerned about them. They were made up. They were ginned up. And while Republicans, of course, fomented these fears and exaggerated and preyed upon them, they are still real. When I talk to a Hispanic voter in Reading, Pennsylvania, who says, I'm voting for Trump because he's talking about the economy in a way that sounds true to me, that's something we have to listen to. And in a way, Kamala was hamstrung by policy, bad policies, policies people did not like. They did not like the migrant policy, whatever you think of it. They didn't like it. They didn't like these economic policies. They don't feel good about the economy. They think they feel less safe in their major cities. And let me tell you, as a woman who migrates between 3 major cities, I can tell you for a fact I feel less safe than I did 4 years ago. I'm not saying that's Biden's fault. That is a fact. And don't give me your numbers and tell me my feelings are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
A woman who has navigated this space for 40 plus years knows when she feels safe and when she doesn't. I feel less safe. Anyway, I think what it says is those voters are willing to overlook things that repulse us because those things don't matter in their everyday lives.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's cool. I don't think that's right. I think we should still want someone representing our country who is moral and ethical and a law-abiding citizen and nice and kind and compassionate, all those things. But I have the luxury of caring about democracy and language and rhetoric because my bills are paid. My bills are getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
I can put gas in my car. Opioids aren't ravaging my town. I don't live in an unsafe town. I don't have a migrant crisis in my backyard. I have the luxury of caring about those things. And I think when you don't, they really just don't matter. Now, that's not addressing the subset of Trump voters who actually love that stuff. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
They are there for that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The grossness, the rhetoric, the insults. They're there because they hate the same people. We're not talking about those people. But I don't believe that's the majority. I believe that's a minority inside of the right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the lens through which I'll look at it because that's the way I can make it make sense to me. And having spent all this time talking to real voters in swing states, this is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't spoken to one voter who has said the Springfield, Ohio migrant eating pet story is why they're going to go vote for Trump.
Right.
They don't care about that.
Mm-hmm.
It does not impact their life. So that's just what I'm taking in.
No, it's a very rational, practical way of looking at things. And, 2016 wouldn't have happened if everything was supposed to happen rationally and logically and,
right.
practically. But
ideally, yeah.
My last question, James Carville came out 2 weeks ago and wrote an op-ed basically guaranteeing that she was going to win.
Yeah.
He's famous for, it's the economy, stupid. Given what you just said, is it still going to be the case? Or is this actually going to be the year where it's more like, it's the convicted felon, rapist, Hitler-loving, dictator, wannabe sociopath. Stupid.
I think it's the economy, stupid.
Mm.
It just is. Listen, again, not to beat this horse, we have the luxury of caring about this stuff. And I think it's worth caring about. Mm-hmm. But you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes, someone who's now working 3 jobs instead of 1. Just to pay the same bills that they've had.
Mm-hmm. But is it bad? Is it to move away from the Harris flawless assessment?
Yeah.
Is it going to be a failure on her part, her campaign, that the right messaging wasn't done in the sense of, folks, here's how your life is going to be impacted if we live in an autocracy, in a dictatorship? I haven't seen that message.
Well, I think she's let surrogates do it, but like I said, I don't think that is the most compelling message. And listen, her messaging on those issues that we talked about, immigration, economy, and crime, her messaging has been good. And I think she made a pivot from Biden. Biden would go out and say the economy is strong as hell. Biden would go out and kind of deny that these were problems. She's acknowledging these are problems. She is talking about an economy that is not working for everyone. She's talking about a migrant crisis. She needs to shut it down. She's talking about crime. It's not a messaging problem. It's a policy problem. She's stuck with some bad She's stuck with some bad, unpopular policies, and she can't shit on them because she works for the guy that's still in office. Like I said, there should have been someone else doing this and moving past Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the transition. Now we need the transformation. And it could never be her because she was inside already.
Right.
So again, I won't look back and criticize her campaign at all. I think she did everything she could have done and better than I thought she could have done it. So I don't think beating the corruption, the democracy message would help, honestly, with any of these voters. The voters who care about that are already with her because how could you not be? If you care about democracy and things like that, you're not with him. Of course you're going to vote for her. I think there are people for whom that just does not cut it. That doesn't rise to the top.
Well, let's hope that 6% undecided somehow finds the gospel these next 4 days, because I can't imagine what this country is going to be like if he wins.
You know what I know? If he wins, I can't do this job anymore. I can't cover him anymore. I can't do that. So, I mean, I'll find something else, but I can't live in 4 more years of Trump's America, covering it. I can't live in that job. It's not good for my mental health.
I am so with you. I would walk my dogs when he was president, and I'd be listening to CNN. They'd play clips of him, and I would just be like, fuck you. Like, people would see like some guy just walking down the street.
Angry, crazy guy.
They don't know what I'm listening to, but I'm just like, fuck you. I can't do that again. So hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm going
to have to tune it out.
Fingers crossed for Tuesday.
We'll have to do something else, Andy. Let's go on the road. Let's do a road show.
I'm down. Comedy.
Where we just talk about movies and musicals and fun stuff.
Yeah, we can do that. Take care.
Bye.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.